poor man was about to demolish his house in the dry plains. And gold coins fall from the wall. Clayton Harper had a heavy heart as he held the hammer with trembling hands. The accumulated bills, the final eviction notice, and the lack of alternatives had led him to that painful decision he never imagined he would have to make. With the first strike against the wall in the living room of the old adobe house inherited from his grandfather, hundreds of ancient golden coins tumbled onto the dirt floor, making a metallic noise that echoed through the silent space. Shadow, his faithful dark-coated canine companion, began barking non-stop, running in circles around the scattered coins. Clayton stood frozen, the hammer still raised in the air, his wide eyes fixed on that golden glimmer he never expected to see in his life. There were dozens, perhaps hundreds of old coins, some with symbols he couldn't decipher, others with faces of people he didn't know. Sweat ran down his tanned face, mixing with the dust sticking to his red plaid shirt. Shadow kept barking, but now with a different tone, more urgent, as if sensing something very important was happening. The dog had been his only companion for the last 5 years, ever since he was left alone on that property in rural Oklahoma, trying to survive on the small corn crop that barely provided sustenance. The adobe house had been built by his grandfather Thomas Harper over 70 years ago when he was still young and dreamed of prospering on that arid land full of stories. Clayton had always heard the elders say that his grandfather was a mysterious man who arrived in that region from who knows where, carrying only an old suitcase and a lot of determination. Now, at 42, Clayton understood why he could never bring himself to get rid of that simple structure. Even when his financial situation got so tight, he considered selling the land. Something always held him back, a strange feeling that those walls held more than met the eye. Shadow also showed peculiar behavior inside the house, always sniffing the walls as if searching for something. The coins remained scattered on the floor, and Clayton finally bent down to pick one up. It was heavy, much heavier than he expected, and had engravings that looked old, possibly from the colonial period. His heart raced as he realized he might be holding a real fortune in his hands. Shadow approached, sniffing the coins curiously but not trying to take them. Clayton's mind began working rapidly. How had his grandfather gotten so many old coins? Why had he hidden them in the wall instead of using them? And more importantly, what should he do now with this discovery that could completely change his life? The silence of the dry plains was broken by the sound of footsteps approaching the yard. It was Mrs. Dorothy, the nearest neighbor, who lived about 500 meters away. The 65-year-old woman had always been curious and had a habit of showing up at the most inconvenient times. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Clayton quickly gathered some coins and hid them in his pockets, trying to disguise what had happened. Mrs. Dorothy approached with her characteristic manner of someone who wants to know everything happening in the vicinity. "Hi, Clayton. What was that noise?" "I thought something had fallen," she asked, craning her neck to try to see inside the house. "It was nothing, Mrs. Dorothy. I was just trying to fix a wall in here," replied Clayton, trying to keep his voice calm, but feeling he was trembling inside. The woman noticed the hammer marks on the wall and the amount of dirt scattered across the floor, but Clayton had managed to hide most of the coins under an old rag he used to clean his tools. Shadow, as if understanding the situation, stopped barking and positioned himself in front of the rag, like a guard. Mrs. Dorothy had always been a good-hearted person, but also known for spreading news through the neighborhood with the speed of the wind. She had raised 3 children alone after her husband abandoned her over 20 years ago, and had developed a network of contacts that ranged from the church priest to the bank manager in the nearest town. "Are you all right? You seem a bit nervous," she insisted, sensing something wasn't normal. "I'm fine, just a little tired. This wall has been giving me trouble for weeks," lied Clayton, wiping the sweat from his face with the back of his hand. Mrs. Dorothy looked around once more, but seemed satisfied with the explanation. After a few minutes of conversation about the dry weather and the difficulties of the region, she said goodbye and left. Clayton waited until she had completely disappeared on the horizon before turning his attention back to the coins. Shadow had remained quiet throughout the entire visit, as if he knew the importance of keeping the secret. When they were finally alone again, Clayton removed the rag and once more contemplated the treasure scattered on the floor. There were more coins than he had initially calculated, maybe 300 or 400 pieces. Some were brighter, others darkened by time, but they all seemed to be made of precious metal. Clayton had never been a studious person, but he grew up hearing stories about the American colonial period and knew that old coins could be worth a lot of money these days. The afternoon was fading, and he needed to make a decision about what to do with that discovery. His first reaction was relief, thinking he could finally pay off all his debts and still have enough money to start life over. But soon after, a worry took over his thoughts. What if someone questioned the origin of the coins? Clayton had always been known in the region as an honest and hard-working man. He had never been involved in any kind of suspicious activity, and his reputation was clean. But he knew that such a large quantity of old coins could arouse the curiosity of the authorities, especially if he suddenly showed up wanting to sell them. Shadow approached and rested his head on Clayton's leg, as if sensing his owner's anguish. The dog had been found as a puppy, abandoned on the road, and had since become his most faithful companion. He was an intelligent animal who seemed to understand Clayton's moods and always tried to comfort him in difficult times. While petting Shadow's fur, Clayton began to remember forgotten details from his childhood. His grandfather Thomas had always been a reserved man who spoke little about his past. When Clayton was a child and asked questions about the family, his grandfather would change the subject or invent some chore for him to do. Now, looking at those coins, Clayton began to understand that perhaps his grandfather had his reasons for being so discreet. Maybe it wasn't just shyness or a reserved personality. Perhaps there were secrets he could never reveal, not even to his family. The house was getting dark, and Clayton lit a kerosene lamp to better illuminate the room. In the yellowish light of the flame, the coins seemed even more impressive, reflecting small golden dots on the adobe walls. It was an almost unreal sight, as if he were living a dream. But reality soon came knocking again when he remembered the stack of overdue bills piled in the kitchen drawer. The deadline to pay off the land debt was only 15 days, and after that he would lose everything that remained of his grandfather's inheritance. The irony of the situation did not go unnoticed. At the exact moment he was about to lose the property, he discovered a treasure hidden in its walls. Clayton decided to collect all the coins and store them in a safe place while he thought of the best strategy. He found a large can he used to store Shadow's feed and carefully placed all the pieces inside. The weight was considerable, confirming his suspicion that it was precious metal. He hid the can under the bed, covered with some old rags, and tried to disguise any sign of what had happened that afternoon. He swept up all the dust and pieces of adobe that had fallen from the wall, and even tried to partially patch the hole so it wouldn't be so obvious something had been taken from there. Shadow accompanied him through all these movements, like a silent accomplice. The dog seemed to understand this was an important secret, and his ears perked up at any noise coming from outside the house. This complicity between them had always existed, but that day it intensified in a special way. When he finally lay down to try to sleep, Clayton realized it would be impossible to relax. His mind buzzed with plans, doubts, hopes, and fears. For the first time in years, he held in his hands the real possibility of changing his life, but he also carried the responsibility of making the right decisions. Shadow settled on the floor beside the bed, but also seemed restless. The dog lifted his head from time to time, as if hearing noises Clayton didn't notice. The night in the dry plains had always been silent, broken only by the natural sounds of insects and small animals, but that night even those noises seemed different. During the early hours, Clayton was awakened by a noise coming from the backyard. Shadow was already on his feet, growling softly toward the door. With a racing heart, Clayton got up slowly and went to the window to try to see what was happening outside. He saw nothing, but Shadow remained agitated, indicating something had indeed caught his attention. Clayton spent the rest of the night awake, wondering if the discovery of the coins had somehow drawn unwanted attention. Perhaps it was just paranoia, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't leave him. When dawn broke, he made the decision to find someone he could trust to guide him on what to do with the coins. The first person that came to his mind was Father William, who had led the town's small church for over 15 years and was always known for his discretion and wisdom. Father William was a man in his 60s who had arrived in that region when he was young and had witnessed the growth and struggles of many local families. He knew Clayton's family well and had conducted the funeral for his grandfather Thomas a few years before. If anyone could help with sensible advice and keep a secret, it would certainly be him. Before leaving home, Clayton selected some of the coins that seemed most interesting and put them in a small cloth bag. He left Shadow watching over the property and set out on foot along the dirt road leading to town, a walk of about 40 minutes under the already strong sun of the dry plains. The town of St. Benedict Plains was small, with just over 3,000 inhabitants, and served as a support center for the residents of the surrounding rural area. It had a bank branch, a health clinic, a school, a few stores, and the church where Father William celebrated the Sunday masses that gathered people from the entire region. Upon arriving in town, Clayton noticed there was more activity than usual. It was market day, and the streets were full of people from the rural properties coming to buy supplies and settle pending matters. He greeted a few acquaintances along the way, trying to maintain his normal appearance, but he felt his anxiety was almost visible. The church stood atop a small hill, and its simple architecture contrasted with the importance it held in the life of the community. Clayton climbed the stone steps and found Father William organizing some books at the altar, preparing for the evening mass. "Clayton, what a pleasant surprise! How are you, my son?" greeted the priest with his always warm manner. "I'm well, Father. Would you have some time to talk with me? It's about an important matter," asked Clayton, removing his cap out of respect. Father William could tell from his expression and tone of voice that this was something serious. He pointed to a side pew where they could talk with more privacy, away from the curious ears that always frequented the church. "What's going on? You seem worried," observed the priest. Clayton hesitated for a moment, but decided to trust him. He took out the small bag with some coins and showed it to the priest, explaining in detail how he had made the discovery in the wall of his grandfather's house. Father William examined the pieces carefully, clearly impressed by what he was seeing. "Good heavens, these coins look very old. And you said there were hundreds of them in the wall?" asked the priest, still incredulous. "Yes, Father. I don't know what to do. On one hand, it seems like God sent me a solution to all my problems. On the other hand, I'm afraid people will question where these coins came from," confessed Clayton. Father William reflected for a few moments before answering. He knew Clayton's financial situation well and was aware of the difficulties he had been facing. He also knew the young man's character and was certain he wasn't involved in anything illicit. "Clayton, first thing, you need to have these coins appraised by someone who understands the subject. Second thing, it's important to document everything properly to avoid future problems. Your grandfather Thomas was an honest man, and if he hid this in the house, he certainly had his reasons," advised the priest. "But what if the authorities want to confiscate everything? What if they say I have no right to these coins?" worried Clayton. "That's exactly why you need to do everything according to the law. Find a lawyer. Find a professional appraiser. If everything was acquired honestly by your grandfather, you have a right to the inheritance," reassured Father William. The conversation lasted over an hour, and the priest offered to help Clayton find the right professionals to appraise and legalize the situation with the coins. He also suggested that he speak with Mrs. Margaret, a 70-year-old lady who was considered the living memory of the region and might know something about his grandfather Thomas's past. When Clayton left the church, he felt calmer, but still carried a sense of urgency. He needed to resolve the debt situation quickly before he lost the land, but he also wanted to do everything the right way to avoid creating bigger problems. On the way back home, he stopped at Mrs. Margaret's house, a simple but well-kept building, surrounded by a garden full of flowers that contrasted with the aridity of the dry plains. The lady was sitting on the porch, crocheting, and welcomed him with her usual affection. "Clayton, my boy, what a joy to see you here. Sit down, I'll get some fresh coffee," she offered, rising with surprising agility for her age. After a few minutes of conversation about general matters, Clayton decided to broach the subject that had brought him there. He asked if she remembered anything special about his grandfather Thomas, especially about the period when he had arrived in the region. Mrs. Margaret stopped her crochet and became thoughtful for a few moments, as if she were sifting through memories from decades past. Her eyes lit up when she began to recall some details she had stored away in her memory. "Your grandfather was a very reserved man, but I remember when he arrived here in the 1950s, he carried a heavy suitcase and seemed in a hurry to settle down. My late husband commented at the time that he thought he was running from something, but not in a bad way, you know," she recounted. "Running from what?" asked Clayton, interested. "I'm not sure, but back then there was a lot of turmoil in the country. Political changes, people losing property, entire families moving from one region to another. Your grandfather may have been one of those people who needed to start life over somewhere else," speculated Mrs. Margaret. This information made a lot of sense to Clayton. If his grandfather had indeed gone through some difficult situation before arriving there, it would explain both his reserved personality and the need to hide a possible treasure in the walls of the house. "Mrs. Margaret, did you ever see my grandfather with money? Did he seem like a person of means?" asked Clayton, trying to be discreet. "Well, he always had enough to live with dignity, but he never flaunted wealth. He bought what he needed, helped the neighbors when necessary, but lived a simple life. Now that you ask, I always found it curious that he never remarried. He was a handsome man, hard-working. He would have been a good match for many women in the area," the lady reflected. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. This conversation added even more mystery to the figure of Grandfather Thomas. Clayton began to realize that perhaps he had never truly known the man who raised him. The image of his simple and humble grandfather was being replaced by that of someone with a complex and possibly traumatic past. When he arrived home, Shadow greeted him with joyful barks, as he always did. Clayton checked that everything was in order and confirmed that the can with the coins was still in the same place. Everything seemed normal, but his mind was buzzing with the new information he had gathered during the day. That night, he decided to examine the coins more carefully. He separated them by type and tried to identify the dates and symbols engraved on each. Some appeared to be from the American colonial period, others perhaps from the early Republican era. There were also some pieces he couldn't identify, possibly of Portuguese or Spanish origin. The variety of the coins suggested this wasn't a collection formed recently, but rather an accumulation made over years or even decades. This confirmed his suspicion that his grandfather had kept this treasure for a long time, possibly since before he arrived in that region. Shadow always stayed close by, like a silent guardian. The dog seemed to understand the importance of that moment and showed special attention to any noise coming from outside. This instinctive protection from the animal comforted Clayton, who felt less alone in that moment of so many important decisions. During the following days, Clayton tried to maintain his normal routine to avoid raising suspicions. He continued tending the small crop, feeding the chickens, and making necessary repairs on the property. But his mind was constantly focused on the coins and the next steps he needed to take. It was then that he received an unexpected visit that would completely change the course of events. It was his sister Linda, who lived in the state capital and hadn't visited in over 2 years. Linda had always been different from Clayton, ambitious, impatient, and constantly dissatisfied with the simple life of the dry plains. "Clayton, I've missed you, brother," she exclaimed as she got out of the car she had rented for the trip. Linda was 3 years older than Clayton and had always seemed ashamed of the family's humble origins. After she got a job as a sales clerk at a department store in Oklahoma City, she rarely returned to the house where they grew up. Her visits were always brief and full of complaints about the harsh conditions of the dry plains. "Linda, what a surprise! What brings you here?" asked Clayton, genuinely surprised by the visit. "I miss the family, and I also wanted to talk to you about some important things," she replied, carrying a small suitcase. Shadow greeted Linda with suspicion. The dog had always been a good judge of character, and his cautious reaction put Clayton on alert. Linda never liked animals much, and always complained about Shadow's presence when she came to visit. During dinner, Linda talked about her life in the capital, the financial troubles she was facing, and the difficulty of keeping her job in tough times. Clayton noticed his sister was more worried than usual, but still didn't understand the real reason for the visit. It was the next morning that Linda revealed her true intentions. While having coffee, she began to talk about their grandfather's inheritance and the need to sell the property to split the money between the two of them. "Clayton, have you ever thought about selling this old house? The land is worth something, and we could split the money," she suggested, trying to sound casual. "No, Linda, this house is all I have, and besides, it has sentimental value. It's where we grew up," replied Clayton, immediately on the defensive. "Sentimental value doesn't pay the bills, brother. You're struggling, I'm struggling. It's better we sell everything and each go our own way," insisted Linda. Clayton realized his sister was being evasive about her true motivations. Linda had never shown interest in the property before, and now she showed up out of nowhere wanting to force a sale. He decided not to mention anything about the coins until he better understood her intentions. Over the next 2 days, Linda continued to pressure Clayton about selling the property. She even mentioned she had spoken to a real estate agent in Oklahoma City and could get a good price for the land. His sister's insistence began to make Clayton uncomfortable. It was when Linda made a mistake that revealed her true intentions. During a heated argument about the inheritance, she let slip that she knew their grandfather had hidden valuable things in the house. "How do you know that?" asked Clayton, surprised. "Oh, I always suspected Grandpa hid money somewhere. He was very cautious about those things," stammered Linda, realizing she had said too much. But Clayton wasn't convinced by the explanation. He pressed his sister until she confessed that she had found some old papers in the house when their grandfather was still alive, but at the time she didn't think much of it and ended up throwing them away. "What kind of papers?" insisted Clayton. "They were some old letters, some yellow documents. I thought they were just worthless old paper. But now thinking about it, maybe they were important," admitted Linda, clearly embarrassed. This revelation infuriated Clayton. Discovering his sister had destroyed documents that might have contained valuable information about the family's past was a hard blow. But it also confirmed his suspicions that there were more secrets hidden in the house besides the coins he had already found. Linda realized she had created a problem and tried to change her strategy. She began to talk about family unity, about the importance of splitting everything equally, and even shed a few crocodile tears trying to sway her brother. But Clayton knew that performance well and wasn't fooled. The tension between the siblings increased when Linda brought along Dennis, her husband, who showed up on the 3rd day claiming to be worried about his wife's delay. Dennis was a man in his 40s, a used car salesman, known for dubious business practices and always on the lookout for opportunities to make easy money. Dennis greeted Clayton with exaggerated friendliness and soon began praising the property, talking about the region's potential for appreciation and suggesting it would be a waste not to take advantage of the right time to sell. "Clayton, you're a smart guy. You must see this region is growing. In a few years, this land could be worth a fortune. But the opposite could also happen. The government could appropriate everything to build a road or some project. It's better to sell now while we have control of the situation," argued Dennis. Shadow showed immediate dislike for Dennis, growling whenever he approached. The dog had a special ability to identify people of questionable character, and his reaction confirmed Clayton's suspicions about his brother-in-law's true intentions. During the night, Clayton heard Dennis and Linda talking in low voices in the guest room. He couldn't make out all the words, but caught fragments talking about searching the house better. There must be more things hidden, and convince him by any means. This conversation confirmed that the couple had information they weren't sharing with Clayton. Probably Linda knew more about their grandfather's secrets than she had admitted, and was now trying to take advantage of the situation to get a share of the inheritance. Clayton stayed awake all night, planning how to handle the situation. He couldn't reveal the discovery of the coins to Linda and Dennis, but he also needed to find a way to get rid of them before they discovered something on their own. The next morning, he made a firm decision. He told the two that he had no interest in selling the property and that they should return to Oklahoma City. Linda's reaction was explosive, with shouts and accusations of selfishness. Dennis tried to mediate, but was actually adding fuel to the fire. "Clayton, you've always been stubborn, but now you're being irrational. This house is falling apart. You don't have money to fix it, and yet you don't want to accept help from family, shouted Linda. The decision is mine, Linda. And it's made, replied Clayton firmly. Dennis tried one last card, suggesting they could buy Clayton's share and take over the entire property. He offered an amount that was clearly below the land's real value, confirming they were trying to take advantage of Clayton's difficult financial situation. I won't sell to you or to anyone, Clayton stated categorically. Linda and Dennis left furious, but not before Linda made veiled threats about legally challenging the ownership of the property. Clayton knew they were empty threats, as all the documents were in order, but the situation had become much more complicated. After they left, Clayton felt relieved, but also worried. He was now certain that Linda suspected the existence of hidden treasures in the house, and knowing his sister's personality, she wouldn't give up easily. She would probably return with some plan to try to force the situation. Shadow seemed as relieved as Clayton by the departure of the unwanted visitors. The dog returned to his normal, playful and protective behavior, but continued to show extra vigilance whenever he heard noises coming from the road. Clayton decided he needed to speed up his plans. He could no longer afford to think calmly about what to do with the coins. He needed to find a buyer or an appraiser as soon as possible, before Linda discovered something, or created legal problems. That's when he remembered Anthony Wilson, an antiques dealer, who had a shop in the neighboring town. Anthony was known for buying and selling old objects, coins and relics from families in the region. He didn't have the best reputation, but he was an option for getting a quick appraisal of the coins. The next day, Clayton selected some of the most interesting coins and made the trip to the town of Green Valley, where Anthony Wilson's shop was located. The shop was small and crammed with various objects, old furniture, paintings, silverware, and a display case full of coins and medals. Anthony was a short, fat man in his 50s, known for his aggressive business practices. When Clayton showed him the coins, the dealer's eyes gleamed with ambition, but he tried to hide his interest. These coins are interesting, but they're not worth much in today's market. People aren't very interested in these colonial pieces, said Anthony, examining the coins with a magnifying glass. Clayton knew he was lying. He had done some basic research and knew that authentic colonial coins had considerable value in the collector's market. But he decided to hear the dealer's offer before making any decision. How much would you pay for these pieces? Asked Clayton. Look, to help you out, I'll give $500 for all of them, offered Anthony. The offer was ridiculously low, confirming that the dealer was trying to take advantage of Clayton's inexperience. Even without being an expert, he knew each coin was worth much more than that individually. I'll think about it, replied Clayton, gathering the coins. Hold on, son, don't leave like that. I can improve the offer. $1,000 for the 5 coins, tried Anthony, realizing he was losing the deal. Clayton left the shop without accepting the proposal, but with the certainty that the coins were worth far more than the dealer had offered. The attempt to deceive him only confirmed he was dealing with a real treasure. On the way back, he stopped at a cafe to think about the situation. He needed to find someone more reliable to appraise the coins, but he was also running out of time to settle his debts. The final deadline was approaching, and he needed to make quick decisions. That's when he overheard a conversation at the next table that caught his attention. 2 men were talking about a university professor from Oklahoma City who was a history expert and sometimes did appraisals of old objects for private individuals. The professor's name was Dr. Robert Harrison, and according to the conversation, he was highly respected in the field. Clayton wrote down the name and decided he would try to find this professor as soon as possible. Perhaps it was his best chance to get an honest and professional appraisal of the coins without the risk of being cheated by dishonest dealers. When he got home, he found an unpleasant surprise. Someone had rummaged through his property during his absence. There were no signs of a break-in, but some things were out of place, especially inside the house. Shadow was agitated and barked a lot when Clayton approached, as if wanting to tell him what had happened. Clayton ran to check if the can with the coins was safe. To his relief, the hiding place hadn't been discovered, but it was obvious someone had been searching the house for something. His suspicions immediately fell on Linda and Dennis, who might have returned to search the property. The intrusion, even without theft, left Clayton extremely worried. Now he was sure that other people knew or suspected the existence of valuable objects hidden in the house. He needed to act quickly before the situation spiraled completely out of his control. That night, he decided to move the coins to an even safer hiding place. He found a small metal box that had belonged to his grandfather and buried it beneath an oak tree in the backyard, a spot only he and Shadow knew well. The dog accompanied him throughout the entire operation, like a faithful accomplice. Over the following days, Clayton managed to get in touch with Dr. Robert Harrison through the university. The professor agreed to meet him for an informal assessment, but warned that any official process would need to follow the proper legal channels. The trip to Oklahoma City was an adventure for Clayton, who rarely left the Dry Plains region. The capital seemed like a different world with its busy streets, tall buildings, and crowds of hurried people. He felt out of place in that urban environment, but was determined to get the answers he needed. 2. Robert Harrison was a middle-aged man, a history professor at the State University of Oklahoma, specializing in the American colonial period. His office at the university was full of books, old maps, and replicas of historical objects. He received Clayton with cordiality and genuine interest. When Clayton showed some of the selected coins, the professor was visibly impressed. He took a magnifying glass and began examining each piece carefully, making notes in a notebook and consulting some reference books. These coins are extraordinary. Some are from the colonial period, others from the early empire. There's even a Portuguese piece here that is very rare, explained Dr. Robert, clearly excited. Are they valuable? Asked Clayton eagerly. Very valuable. Depending on authenticity and condition, each of these pieces could be worth between $5,000 and $15,000. And you said you have hundreds of them, confirmed the professor. The confirmation of the value left Clayton stunned. If the professor's estimate was correct, he had in his hands a fortune that would change not only his life, but possibly the lives of several generations of his family. It was an enormous responsibility and a unique opportunity. Dr. Robert explained the legal procedures necessary for trading ancient coins, including the need to prove their origin and pay taxes on the value. He also warned about the existence of counterfeiters in the market and suggested more detailed tests to confirm the authenticity of all the pieces. Professor, what would you do in my place? Asked Clayton, seeking honest advice. First, I would document everything very well. I would photograph each coin, note where it was found, and look for information about how your grandfather acquired them. Second, I would seek a specialized lawyer to advise on the legal aspects. Third, I would get official appraisals before thinking of selling anything, advised Dr. Robert. The professor also showed academic interest in the discovery. He explained that a treasure of that magnitude could provide valuable information about coin circulation during the colonial period, especially in the interior of the Midwest. He suggested that Clayton consider the possibility of allowing academic studies of the pieces before selling them. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out. Now continuing. The conversation with Dr. Robert lasted almost 3 hours, and Clayton left the university with much more knowledge about his discovery, but also with the awareness that the process would be more complex than he had imagined. It wasn't simply a matter of selling the coins and becoming rich. There were legal, tax, and even ethical issues involved. During the trip back home, Clayton reflected on all the options he had ahead. He could try to sell the coins quickly to pay off his debts, but he would risk future legal problems. He could follow all the official procedures, but that would take time he might not have. When he arrived home, Shadow greeted him with joy, but also with a behavior that indicated something had happened during his absence. The dog led him to the area where he had buried the coins, and Clayton noticed that someone had disturbed the soil around the oak tree. Fortunately, the coins were still buried in the correct spot, but it was evident that someone had been looking for them. The dirt was turned over in several places in the yard, indicating a systematic search. Clayton felt a chill in his stomach, realizing he was being closely watched. He decided he could no longer stay alone on the property. He needed help, but didn't know who to trust. Father William was an option, but involving a religious figure in that situation could create problems for the church. Mrs. Margaret was trustworthy, but she was already advanced in age and couldn't help in case of a confrontation. It was then he remembered Kevin, a distant cousin who lived in the city and worked as a security guard for a local company. Kevin had always been an honest and courageous person, and perhaps he could help Clayton protect the property until he could resolve the coin situation. Clayton got in touch with Kevin and explained he was going through some problems and needed help watching the property for a few days. He didn't go into details about the coins, but made it clear it was something important and potentially dangerous. Kevin agreed to help without asking many questions. He had known Clayton since childhood and knew he wasn't a troublemaker. If he was asking for help, he certainly had valid reasons. They arranged for Kevin to start spending the night at the property the following day. Kevin's presence brought a sense of security that Clayton hadn't felt in days. His cousin was a strong man, experienced in risky situations, and his presence would certainly discourage any attempted break-in. Shadow also approved of Kevin, treating him as an ally from the first moment. During the first night with Kevin on the property, Clayton decided to tell the whole truth about the coins. He knew he needed to trust someone, and his cousin had always proven to be a man of his word. Kevin's reaction was one of surprise, but also of total support. "Man, that's incredible. But it's also dangerous. If word gets out, you'll have problems with all kinds of people," Kevin warned. "I know. That's why I need to resolve this as quickly as possible," Clayton agreed. Kevin suggested they reinforce the property's security and create an emergency plan in case someone tried to break in again. He also offered to accompany Clayton in the next steps of the coin legalization process. In the following days, with Kevin providing security, Clayton was able to focus better on the practical aspects of the situation. He sought out a lawyer recommended by Dr. Robert, photographed all the coins as instructed, and began gathering the necessary documentation. The lawyer, Dr. Stephen Carter, specialized in tax law and historical heritage. After analyzing the case, he confirmed that Clayton had a legal right to the coins as the property's heir, but warned about the need to pay capital gains taxes when he sold the pieces. The tax amount could reach 22.5% of the total value of the coins. "It's a high percentage, but it's the price of legality," explained Dr. Stephen. Even with the taxes, Clayton would still have a substantial sum to change his life. The net amount would be enough to pay off all his debts, renovate the property, invest in farming, and still leave a good reserve for emergencies. But the legalization process would take at least 2 months, and the deadline to pay off the property debt was only 1 week. Clayton found himself facing a dilemma: try to negotiate an extension with his creditors or quickly sell some coins, even risking legal trouble. It was Kevin who suggested a third option: use some coins as collateral to secure a loan that would settle the immediate debts. This way, Clayton would buy time to regularize the entire situation without losing the property. The idea was good, but finding a bank that would accept old coins as collateral wouldn't be easy. Most financial institutions have no experience with this type of transaction and consider it too risky to lend money based on objects whose value can be questionable. Dr. Stephen knew a private banker who sometimes performed unconventional operations for special clients. Mr. Harold Mitchell was the owner of a small financial firm that mainly served local businessmen, but he also had experience with transactions involving works of art and valuables. Clayton and Kevin went to present the proposal to Mr. Harold, taking some of the most valuable coins and the preliminary appraisal made by Dr. Robert. The banker examined the pieces with interest, but showed skepticism about the feasibility of the operation. "It's an interesting case, but too risky for me. Old coins can be counterfeit, their origin can be questioned, they can depreciate on the market. I would need additional guarantees," explained Mr. Harold. "What kind of guarantees?" asked Clayton. "The property is a guarantor. If you can't repay the loan, I would have the right to foreclose on the land," proposed the banker. The proposal put Clayton exactly in the situation he was trying to avoid, the risk of losing the property. But it was the only option available within his time frame. After much thought, he decided to accept the terms, trusting that he could regularize the coins and repay the loan within the stipulated period. Mr. Harold lent $40,000, an amount sufficient to settle all of Clayton's debts, with a 6-month repayment term and 3% monthly interest. It was a high rate, but still cheaper than losing everything he had. As collateral, they kept 10 of the most valuable coins and the mortgage on the property. With the money in hand, Clayton managed to settle all his debts and even had some left over to invest in improving the property. The feeling of relief was immense, but now he carried a new pressure. He had 6 months to regularize the remaining coins and get enough money to repay the loan. Kevin continued helping with the security of the property, but also began accompanying Clayton in his comings and goings to resolve the bureaucratic issues. The coin authentication process was being handled by experts in New York, and the preliminary results were promising. During this period, Linda tried a few more times to contact Clayton, always with excuses to visit the property. But with Kevin present, she could no longer search the house as she had done before. His sister's frustration was evident, but she hadn't given up on her plans yet. One day, Linda showed up accompanied by a stranger who introduced himself as a family genealogy researcher. The man claimed to be interested in the history of the Harper family and asked permission to interview Clayton about his grandfather Thomas's past. Kevin immediately became suspicious of the visitor's intentions. His questions were very specific, about possible valuables his grandfather might have left, and he showed too much knowledge about the family to be just a casual researcher. "Excuse me, sir, but who do you work for?" Kevin asked directly. "I'm an independent researcher. I work for myself," replied the man, visibly uncomfortable. "And is Linda paying for your work?" Kevin insisted. The man stammered some confused explanations and ended up leaving the property without getting the information he was looking for. Linda was furious with Kevin's interference, but could do nothing except leave as well. This incident confirmed for Clayton that his sister had hired someone to investigate the property. She probably knew more about their grandfather's secrets than she had revealed, and was determined to get her share of any treasure that might exist. The situation grew even more tense when Dennis appeared alone a few days later with a partnership proposal. He suggested he could help Clayton manage any business that arose from the property in exchange for a percentage of the profits. "Clayton, I have business experience. If you found anything of value around here, I can help you sell it for the best price," offered Dennis. "I haven't found anything and I don't need a partner," Clayton replied curtly. "Look, I know you're hiding something. Linda told me about the papers she found years ago. They spoke of a treasure buried on the property," pressed Dennis. "Even if that were true, you wouldn't be entitled to anything," retorted Kevin, intervening in the conversation. Dennis realized he wouldn't be able to intimidate Clayton with Kevin present, but before leaving, he made a veiled threat about involving authorities to investigate the origin of any sudden wealth Clayton might display. This threat worried Clayton greatly, because he knew Dennis had dubious contacts and could really create problems with regulatory agencies. It was important to speed up the process of legalizing the coins before anyone tried to question their legality. Dr. Stephen Carter worked intensively to prepare all the necessary documentation. The process included authenticity reports for the coins, proof of legal ownership of the property where they were found, and a formal declaration of the discovery to the proper authorities. The results of the authenticity tests were better than expected. Of the coins analyzed, 95% were confirmed as authentic and in excellent condition. The total value of the collection was estimated at approximately $800,000, a sum that would completely transform Clayton's life. But the good news came with an unexpected complication. The National Heritage Institute expressed interest in studying the coins, claiming they could have national historical importance. This would not prevent Clayton from selling them, but would create additional bureaucratic delays. Dr. Robert Harrison, the university professor, interceded with the institute to expedite the studies. He argued that the private collection could be studied without the need for confiscation, provided the owner allowed access to researchers. Clayton agreed to the proposal as long as it didn't delay the process further. While awaiting the final release from the proper authorities, Clayton decided to investigate his grandfather Thomas's past more deeply. Perhaps there were clues about the origin of the coins that could help with the legalization process. With the help of Mrs. Margaret and other long-time residents of the area, he managed to gather more information about his grandfather's arrival in the region. He discovered that Thomas Harper had arrived there in 1952, coming from the interior of Arkansas, and that he brought with him a story about having lost properties due to political issues. The research revealed that in the 1950s, there were many political conflicts in the Midwest, and several families of small rural landowners were forced to abandon their lands. Some took their most valuable possessions with them, hoping to start life anew elsewhere. This information gave credibility to the theory that the coins were legally the family's property and had been preserved by the grandfather during a period of instability. Dr. Stephen used this information to strengthen the case with the regulatory agencies. 3 months after the process began, Clayton finally received authorization to sell the coins. The tax amount, as expected, was significant, but a substantial sum still remained to transform his life. The first step was to pay off the loan with Mr. Harold, recovering the 10 coins he had left as collateral. The banker was impressed with Clayton's punctuality and offered to help with future investments. With the money from the sold coins, Clayton was able to completely renovate the house, maintaining its original architecture, but with all modern comforts. He installed a solar energy system, drilled an artesian well, and created a structure to develop sustainable agriculture. Part of the money was invested in purchasing modern farming equipment and forming a small cooperative with neighbors interested in improving local production. Clayton became an example of how to use unexpected resources intelligently and socially responsibly. Kevin decided to leave his job in the city and became Clayton's partner in the new agricultural company they created. His experience in security proved valuable for protecting the investments and keeping the operation running smoothly. Linda and Dennis tried to legally challenge the legitimacy of Clayton's inheritance, but they couldn't prove any irregularities. Dr. Stephen had prepared the documentation impeccably, and the entire transaction was within the law. Linda's frustration with her brother's success was evident, but she was ultimately forced to accept that she had lost her chance to benefit from the discovery. Her greed and lack of patience came at a high cost, while Clayton's honesty and prudence were rewarded. Dr. Robert managed to publish an academic article about the coins found by Clayton, contributing to the knowledge about monetary circulation in the colonial period. The study gave academic recognition to the discovery and further increased the family's prestige. Shadow continued to be the same faithful companion as always, but now had much more space to run and play on the expanded property. The dog seemed to understand that his life had improved significantly, and his joy was contagious to everyone around. A year after the discovery, Clayton reflected on how his life had completely changed. It wasn't just the financial aspect, but also how he had handled the pressures, temptations, and responsibilities that had arisen along the way. The experience taught him about the importance of honesty, patience, and seeking professional guidance in crucial moments. He also learned to value the people who truly cared about his well-being, distinguishing them from those who only appeared when there was something to gain. The property he had almost lost due to lack of money became a prosperous business that generated jobs for the region. The treasure hidden in the walls by his grandfather Thomas had turned into lasting prosperity for the entire local community. Clayton never discovered all the details about how his grandfather had obtained those coins, but he came to the conclusion that it no longer mattered. What mattered was that Thomas Harper had preserved that heritage through decades of hardship, and now it was being used to honor the memory of the man who had laid the foundation for that transformation. Mrs. Margaret, who had helped with information about the past, became a sort of adoptive grandmother to Clayton. He made sure to visit her regularly and to ensure she didn't go without in her old age. The gratitude for the information she had provided turned into genuine affection. Father William celebrated a special Thanksgiving Mass in the small church, asking for blessings for the success of Clayton Harper's new ventures. The ceremony brought together the entire local community, which had closely followed the transformation in the young man's life. The dishonest merchant, Anthony Wilson, tried to approach Clayton after learning about the success of the coins, offering partnerships and apologies for the low prices he had offered previously. But Clayton politely declined any business with someone who had tried to cheat him. Dr. Stephen Carter became the permanent lawyer for Clayton's businesses, helping to legally structure all the new entrepreneurial activities. The experience with the coin case had taught both of them a great deal about the importance of proper legal planning. Mr. Harold Mitchell, the banker who had helped with the emergency loan, became a financial partner in some of the agricultural cooperative's expansion projects. His business experience complemented Clayton's determination and honesty well. The renovated house kept a special room where Clayton stored some of the most beautiful coins as a memento of his grandfather. He did not sell them because they represented the memory of Thomas Harper and the transformation that had changed the course of his family. 2 years after the discovery, Clayton received a visit from a professional genealogist hired by an American university. The researcher was studying internal migration routes in the United States in the 20th century and had found records about Thomas Harper. The research revealed that his grandfather had been the owner of a cattle ranch in Arkansas and had indeed lost his lands due to political persecution during Huey Long's administration. The coins were part of the assets he managed to preserve during his escape. This final discovery completed the puzzle of the family's past. Thomas Harper was not just a simple peasant, but a man who had faced great adversity and managed to preserve part of his estate for future generations. Clayton's story spread throughout the region and became an example of how to handle unexpected discoveries ethically and intelligently. Young people from the area often sought him out for advice on entrepreneurship and social responsibility. The agricultural cooperative he had created expanded to include 20 families from the region, all benefiting from improved cultivation techniques and the prices obtained for their products. What began as an individual discovery turned into collective prosperity. Shadow grew old by Clayton's side, always maintaining his loyalty and intelligence. The dog became a sort of mascot for the cooperative, known by all the families involved in the project. His constant presence had been crucial during the most difficult moments of the journey. Kevin got married and brought his family to live in the area, attracted by the quality of life and the job opportunities created by the new businesses. The friendship between the cousins grew even stronger based on the mutual trust demonstrated during times of crisis. Linda eventually tried to reconnect with Clayton, especially after her own businesses in the capital began to face difficulties. But he, while holding no grudge, maintained a prudent distance, offering limited help without compromising his own projects. Dennis disappeared from the family's life after his dubious schemes in the city caught the attention of the authorities. Linda divorced him and went back to using her maiden name, trying to restart her life away from the troubles he had created. Dr. Robert Harrison continued his research on the coins and managed to publish an academic book that included Clayton's story as an example of historical asset preservation by rural families. The book was well received in academic circles and brought national recognition to the discovery. 5 years after finding the first coins in the wall, Clayton had become one of the most respected small rural entrepreneurs in the region. His story inspired other families to value their traditions and seek sustainable forms of development. The property that was almost demolished out of financial despair had transformed into a model of modern family farming. Agriculture students from various universities visited the site to learn about the sustainable techniques developed by the cooperative. Clayton never forgot the lessons learned during that period of discovery and transformation. Honesty, patience, seeking professional guidance, and valuing the right people had been fundamental to the success of his journey. The oak tree where he had temporarily buried the coins became a special symbol on the property. Clayton installed a bench under its shade, where he would often sit in the afternoons to reflect on the path traveled and plan for the future. Shadow, even in old age, still liked to lie down near the oak tree, as if guarding the memory of that special day when his owner discovered that life can change completely in a single moment, as long as one has the courage to make the right choices. Clayton's story became a local legend, told and retold by the elders of the region to new generations. It was a story about values, about the importance of honoring the past while building the future, and about how true prosperity arises when success is shared with the community. Mrs. Margaret, now over 75 years old, still visited the property regularly and enjoyed telling the children how she had helped Clayton discover the history of his grandfather Thomas. Her living memory had become a heritage even more valuable than the old coins. Father William often used Clayton's story in his homilies as an example of how providence can work through human honesty and perseverance. The transformation of the young man's life had become a modern parable about faith and work. The modern farming equipment installed on the property allowed for much greater production with less physical effort. Clayton had invested in technology that increased efficiency without harming the environment, creating a sustainable model of family farming. The cooperative developed its own brand for its organic products, which were sold both in the local market and shipped to the state capital. The quality of the products and the story behind the company created constant demand and premium prices. Kevin had specialized in farm management through online and in-person courses, becoming an even more valuable partner in the business. His practical experience combined with the theoretical knowledge he acquired elevated the cooperative's management level. Dr. Stephen expanded his office and began handling other cases involving family historical heritage, always using the experience gained from Clayton's case as a reference. He became a regional authority on legal matters related to archaeological discoveries and family treasures. Mr. Harold diversified his financial businesses to include rural microcredit, inspired by the success of his partnership with Clayton. His small finance company became an important source of capital for small rural entrepreneurs in the region. The renovated house maintained its original soul, but with all modern comforts. Clayton made a point of preserving elements of the traditional architecture, honoring the memory of his grandfather Thomas, while enjoying the amenities that success had provided. Academic visits became frequent, but Clayton always made a point of explaining to researchers that the most important thing was not the coins themselves, but the lessons about character and community that the experience had taught. The artesian well not only ensured sufficient water for the property, but also allowed Clayton to help neighbors during dry periods. Sharing resources had become a life philosophy he applied whenever possible. The solar energy installed on the property generated surplus that was sold to the local power grid, creating an additional source of income and demonstrating Clayton's commitment to environmentally responsible practices. The drip irrigation system allowed for year-round cultivation, maximizing production and ensuring steady income for all families in the cooperative. Technology had become a tool for social inclusion. The children in the region grew up hearing Clayton's story, and many developed an interest in modern agriculture and social entrepreneurship. The transformation had created an inspiring effect that extended beyond immediate economic benefits. Shadow had trained other dogs in the neighborhood, passing on his skills of protection and companionship. Even in old age, he maintained his dignity and intelligence, being respected by all the animals on the property. The special room with the preserved coins became a small family museum, where Clayton received visitors interested in the history. He always made a point of explaining that the true treasure was not in the coins, but in the opportunities they had created. The sustainable agriculture courses offered on the property attracted participants from various states, creating a network of knowledge and exchange of experiences. Clayton had become an informal educator, sharing practical wisdom with anyone who wanted to learn. The story documented by Dr. Robert was adapted into a book of regional tales, reaching an even larger audience. The inspiring narrative transcended academic circles and became popular reading in local schools. Dennis tried to return to the region a few times, always looking for easy opportunities, but found closed doors. His reputation preceded him, and the community had learned to value people of character over opportunists. The small-town church received a new renovation, partially funded by donations from Clayton and other cooperative members. Father William managed to fulfill long-held dreams of improving the sacred space that served the entire community. Mrs. Dorothy, the curious neighbor who had witnessed the first moments of the discovery, became one of the official storytellers of the history. She liked to recall how she had sensed something special was happening that day. The taxes paid on the sale of the coins contributed significantly to the municipal budget, allowing improvements to local infrastructure that benefited the entire population. Individual success had generated indirect collective benefits. The experience with the coins had taught Clayton about the importance of diversification. He never concentrated all his wealth in a single investment, always maintaining reserves and varied applications to protect the family's future. The relationship with Linda improved gradually over the years, especially after she publicly acknowledged that she had acted wrongly out of greed. Clayton's forgiveness demonstrated his emotional maturity. The agricultural techniques developed by the cooperative were adopted by other regions of the Dry Plains. multiplying the environmental and social benefits. The model created by Clayton became a reference for sustainable rural development. Kevin eventually opened a small technical school on the property, offering practical courses in modern agriculture for young people in the region. Education had become a natural extension of the values promoted by the cooperative. Dr. Stephen published a manual on the legal aspects of family heritage discoveries, using Clayton's case as the primary study. The material became a reference for lawyers dealing with similar situations. Mr. Harold expanded his operations to include specialized rural insurance, protecting small producers against climate losses and other adversities. His experience with Clayton had shown the importance of proper financial protection. The cooperative developed partnerships with universities for research in sustainable agriculture, creating a cycle of innovation that benefited both academia and practical producers. Theoretical knowledge and practical experience complemented each other perfectly. Shadow, even at an advanced age, still accompanied Clayton on walks around the property, maintaining his role as companion and protector. His longevity was attributed to the love and care he received throughout his life. The cooperative's organic product brand gained national recognition, being sold in specialized markets in various state capitals. The superior quality justified premium prices that ensured a satisfactory profit margin for all producers. The courses offered on the property included not only agricultural techniques, but also financial education and rural entrepreneurship. Clayton had learned the importance of a complete education during his own transformation journey. The House Museum with the preserved coins received an official visit from the National Heritage Institute, which recognized the importance of private conservation for preserving national memory. The recognition brought additional prestige to the initiative. The new families that joined the cooperative over the years were carefully selected based on shared values and commitment to sustainable practices. Growth without loss of quality was a fundamental principle. Dr. Roberts secured an international research grant to study historical heritage preservation by rural communities, using the model developed by Clayton as a reference. The local story gained worldwide academic projection. Father William organized an oral history preservation project for the region, documenting stories of old families like Clayton's. The initiative created a valuable cultural archive for future generations. The solar energy installed on the property inspired other producers to adopt renewable sources, creating a regional network of clean energy generation. Clayton's example catalyzed positive environmental changes throughout the area. The artesian well became a reference point for hydrogeological studies in the region, contributing to the mapping of underground water resources. Scientific knowledge and practical need combined productively. The children educated with the values promoted by the cooperative began to assume leadership positions in their own communities, multiplying the principles of honesty, hard work, and social responsibility. Mrs. Margaret documented her memories in recordings that became part of the county's cultural archive, preserving decades of local history that might have been lost over time. The experience of nearly losing everything had taught Clayton about the fragility of life and the importance of seizing every opportunity to make a difference. He never again took what he owned for granted. Modern equipment allowed the cooperative to process its own products, adding value and increasing the profit margin. Vertical integration had become a key strategy for economic sustainability. The collective management model developed by the cooperative was studied by economists interested in alternatives to traditional capitalism. Experience had shown that cooperation and competition could coexist productively. Kevin published a book about his transition from urban security to rural entrepreneurship, inspiring other urban professionals to consider opportunities in the countryside. Dr. Stephen specialized in environmental law and began advising the cooperative on legal sustainability matters. His expertise grew alongside the complexity of the projects developed. Mr. Harold became one of the main funders of sustainable agriculture projects in the Midwest, using his experience with Clayton to evaluate similar proposals in other regions. Clayton's story was included in regional textbooks as an example of successful rural entrepreneurship. Students of various ages learned about values and perseverance through his narrative. Shadow had become a local legend, known for his loyalty and intelligence. Even in old age, he remained the symbol of the human-animal partnership that characterized the farm's philosophy. The coin room received a modern security system, ensuring the historical heritage was preserved for future generations. Protection and public access were carefully balanced. The sustainable methods developed by the cooperative contributed to the recovery of degraded areas in the region, demonstrating that economic prosperity and environmental conservation could go hand in hand. Partnerships with universities resulted in dozens of academic papers and several practical innovations that benefited producers across the country. Knowledge generated locally had national application. The cooperative's brand expanded to include processed products like sweets, preserves and seasonings, always maintaining the organic and sustainable standards that were its trademark. Clayton never forgot his humble origins and always maintained a simple lifestyle, despite the prosperity achieved. Wealth had changed his possibilities, but not his essence. The example of financial transparency maintained by Clayton influenced other cooperatives in the region to adopt similar practices, creating an environment of trust that facilitated partnerships and investments. The water conservation techniques developed on the farm were adapted for domestic use, helping rural families better cope with the drought periods characteristic of the dry plains. The continuing education offered by the cooperative included exchanges with producers from other regions, creating a knowledge network that transcended geographical and cultural boundaries. Dr. Roberts secured funding to create a center for rural historical heritage studies, using Clayton's experience as a pilot project. The initiative promised to benefit researchers from various fields. Father William developed a practical theology that incorporated the values demonstrated by Clayton, showing how faith and social action can work together to transform communities. The improved infrastructure on the farm attracted other businesses to the region, creating a cycle of development that benefited the entire municipality. Individual success had catalyzed collective growth. The composting system developed by the cooperative became a model for organic waste management on small farms, contributing to reducing the environmental impact of family agriculture. Children who grew up visiting the farm developed an advanced environmental awareness, becoming natural advocates for sustainable practices in their own families and communities. Mrs. Dorothy became the unofficial guide for visitors interested in Clayton's history, always adding personal details that enriched the official narrative. The experience of dealing with family pressures during the discovery of the coins taught Clayton about the importance of setting clear boundaries, even with close people. The financial education courses offered on the property helped dozens of rural families improve their resource management, multiplying the benefits of the knowledge acquired by Clayton. The partnership with research institutes resulted in the development of seeds adapted to local conditions, increasing the productivity and resilience of the region's crops. Kevin became a speaker at sustainable agriculture conferences, sharing the practical experience gained in transforming Clayton's property. Dr. Stephen created a legal protocol for family historical heritage discoveries that was adopted by other states, standardizing procedures and protecting the rights of discoverers. Mr. Harold established an investment fund specialized in family farming, using sustainability criteria inspired by the experience with Clayton. The property became an educational rural tourism destination, offering visitors the opportunity to learn about sustainable agriculture and local history. Shadow had trained a new generation of dogs on the property, passing on his skills in protection and harmonious coexistence with other animals. The cooperative developed a mentorship program for young rural entrepreneurs, offering practical guidance based on the experience accumulated over the years. The innovations in sustainable agriculture developed on the property attracted international attention, resulting in invitations to participate in conferences in other countries. The community development model, created by Clayton, was studied by non-governmental organizations interested in replicating similar experiences in other regions. The preservation of the historical coins inspired other families in the region to value and document their own cultural heritage, creating a network for preserving local memory. The efficient irrigation methods developed on the property were adapted for urban gardens, bringing knowledge from the countryside to the city. The personal transformation experience lived by Clayton inspired the creation of human development programs in other cooperatives in the region. Dr. Robert published a second book focused specifically on the methodology of preserving family historical heritage, using practical cases to illustrate theoretical concepts. Father William organized spiritual retreats on the property, offering participants the opportunity for reflection in an environment that symbolized transformation through solid values. The cooperative's brand earned international sustainability certifications, allowing export to demanding markets that valued environmentally responsible practices. The soil management techniques developed on the property contributed to the recovery of areas affected by erosion, demonstrating how well-practiced agriculture can restore ecosystems. Clayton established an educational fund that offered scholarships to rural youth interested in technical and higher education courses related to sustainable agriculture. The documented history of the Harper family became part of the municipality's cultural heritage, being included in tourist itineraries and official educational materials. The example of transparent and democratic management of the cooperative influenced other organizations in the region to adopt similar practices of participatory governance. Kevin developed a methodology for professional transition for urban workers interested in rural opportunities based on his own experience of change. Dr. Stephen became a consultant for the state government on issues related to family historical heritage, helping to create more suitable public policies. Mr. Harold expanded his financial services to include historical heritage insurance, protecting families who owned culturally valuable objects. The property received official recognition as a model of sustainable family farming, being included in government incentive programs for similar practices. Shadow, even in advanced old age, maintained his routine of protecting the property, being respected by all visitors as the guardian of the site's history. The coin room was equipped with multimedia resources that told the story of the discovery in an interactive way, making the educational experience more engaging. The principles of cooperation and sustainability practiced on the property inspired the creation of a regional network of producers who shared knowledge and resources. The technological innovations developed on the property were patented and licensed to other cooperatives, generating additional funds for investment in research. Clayton's experience with external pressures during the coin legalization process was documented as a case study for business law courses. The environmental education methods practiced on the property were adopted by schools in the region, integrating practical knowledge into the formal curriculum. The cooperative established commercial partnerships with restaurants specializing in regional cuisine, ensuring a stable market for differentiated organic products. Mrs. Margaret received an official tribute from the municipality for her contribution to the preservation of local memory, being recognized as a living heritage of the region. The transformation of Clayton's life inspired the creation of a regional television program about stories of overcoming adversity in the interior of the Midwest. The values of honesty and hard work demonstrated by Clayton became a reference for moral education in schools and churches in the region. The property developed a renewable energy system that not only met its own needs, but also provided clean energy to neighboring properties. The food preservation techniques developed by the cooperative allowed for reduced post-harvest losses and added value to products through artisanal processing. The experience of dealing with family conflicts during the coin discovery was transformed into educational material for mediation of estate disputes. Dr. Robert secured international funding to expand his research on rural historical heritage preservation, elevating the academic recognition of the work. Father William developed a special liturgy that incorporated elements of dry plains culture, valuing local traditions within universal religious practice. The cooperative created an exchange program with producers from other countries, promoting the exchange of knowledge and experiences in international sustainable agriculture. The economic development model, based on ethical values practiced on the property, attracted socially responsible investors interested in similar projects. Shadow became a symbol of the property, being photographed by visitors and appearing in promotional materials as a representative of the philosophy of loyalty and protection. The coin room received a virtual reality system that allowed visitors to virtually experience the moment of discovery, creating a unique, immersive experience. The sustainable practices developed on the property contributed to the region being recognized as a pilot zone for ecological agriculture by the state government. Clayton's story was adapted for popular theater, being presented at regional festivals and carrying its message of values to even larger audiences. The example of the cooperative's participatory management influenced municipal public policies, promoting greater citizen participation in decisions affecting the rural community. Kevin published articles in specialized journals about the transition from urban careers to rural opportunities, becoming a reference on the subject. Dr. Stephen created a law firm specializing in sustainable rural law, offering legal services aligned with environmental and social principles. Mr. Harold established investment criteria based on social and environmental impact, pioneering the concept of sustainable finance in the region. The property became a research center for climate adaptation in family farming, developing strategies to deal with changes in the regional climate. The integrated pest management techniques developed on the property eliminated the need for chemical pesticides, creating a healthier environment for producers and consumers. The cooperative established a rural succession program that prepared young people from the region to take on modern and sustainable agricultural activities. The values of transparency and honesty practiced by Clayton inspired the creation of a code of ethics for rural cooperatives in the region. Dr. Robert received an invitation to teach at international universities about community heritage preservation methodologies, expanding the reach of his research. Father William organized a network of rural churches focused on social action based on practical Christian values, inspired by Clayton's example. The cooperative's brand expanded into international markets, bringing sustainable American products to conscious consumers in other countries. The property developed a natural laboratory for testing innovative agricultural techniques, attracting researchers and companies interested in sustainable solutions. Shadow inspired a responsible adoption program for abandoned animals, creating an animal protection network integrated with the values of care and responsibility. Clayton's transformation experience was included in university social entrepreneurship programs as an example of a business with positive impact. The financial education methods developed on the property were adapted for underserved urban communities, multiplying their social impact. The cooperative created its own quality seal that guaranteed sustainable origin and ethical practices, adding premium value to the products. The innovations in rural logistics developed on the property reduced transportation costs and improved access to distant markets for small producers. The Harper family history inspired genealogical research that revealed historical connections important for understanding the region's social formation. The model of collective governance practiced in the cooperative was studied by political scientists interested in small-scale participatory democracy. Kevin became a career transition consultant for urban professionals interested in rural opportunities, basing his work on personal experience. Dr. Stephen developed an online course on legal aspects of heritage discoveries, democratizing access to specialized legal information. Mr. Harold created a rural historical heritage preservation fund that offered financing for families interested in preserving their cultural inheritances. The property became a model for government sustainable rural development programs, influencing public policies at the state and federal level. The urban agriculture techniques adapted from the property's rural methods helped underserved communities develop local food production systems. The cooperative established partnerships with renowned chefs interested in authentic organic ingredients, creating a sophisticated market for regional products. Mrs. Margaret became an informal consultant for other oral history preservation projects, sharing her experience in documenting family stories. The transformation of the property inspired educational documentaries on sustainable development that were distributed to rural schools across the country. The values of perseverance and integrity demonstrated by Clayton influenced rural leadership training programs in various regions. The property developed a rainwater harvesting and treatment system that became a benchmark for sustainable construction in semi-arid regions. The regenerative agriculture practices developed by the cooperative contributed to soil carbon sequestration, participating in environmental credit programs. Clayton's experience with family conflict management was incorporated into rural mediation programs, helping other families resolve property disputes. Dr. Robert published a third book focused on participatory methodologies for heritage preservation, consolidating his international expertise on the subject. Father William developed a contextualized theology that integrated Christian values with sustainable development practices, influencing other rural parishes. The cooperative's brand received international sustainability awards, elevating the prestige of American products in demanding markets. The property's natural laboratory developed plant varieties adapted to the semi-arid climate, contributing to regional food security. Shadow, even at a very advanced age for a dog, remained a symbol of the loyalty and protection that characterized the property's philosophy. The coin room became a center for numismatic studies, attracting collectors and researchers interested in American monetary history. The composting techniques developed on the property were adapted for urban condominiums, reducing organic waste generation in cities. The cooperative created an internship program for university students interested in sustainable agriculture, training a new generation of conscious professionals. The circular economy principles practiced on the property minimized waste and maximized resource utilization, creating a model of efficiency. Clayton's story inspired the creation of a regional museum about social transformation through ethical values, attracting visitors interested in local history. The example of responsible reinvestment of the funds from the coins influenced financial education policies for government program beneficiaries. Kevin specialized in career transition psychology, offering emotional support beyond practical guidance for career changes. Dr. Stephen became a mediator specialized in family property disputes, using techniques developed during Clayton's case. Mr. Harold expanded the concept of sustainable finance to include cultural impact criteria, valuing projects that preserve local traditions. The property received municipal cultural heritage status, guaranteeing legal protection and resources for the maintenance of its historical characteristics. The renewable energy innovations developed on the property attracted research investments from other universities interested in solutions for the dry plains. The cooperative established a distribution network that connected small producers directly to urban consumers, eliminating unnecessary intermediaries. Mrs. Dorothy became the official storyteller during school visits, always emphasizing the importance of values like honesty and perseverance. Clayton's transformation inspired a national television program on sustainable rural entrepreneurship, reaching an audience across the country. The environmental education methods practiced on the property were incorporated into pedagogy curricula, training more conscious teachers. The property developed an integrated aquaculture system that complemented agriculture, diversifying production and increasing sustainability. The social inclusion practices adopted by the cooperative ensured the effective participation of women and youth in leadership positions. Clayton's experience with historical heritage assessment was systematized into a protocol that helped other families in similar situations. Dr. Robert received funding to create an international institute for community heritage preservation, expanding the impact of his research. Father William organized a solidarity network among rural parishes based on the principles of cooperation and sustainability demonstrated on the property. The cooperative's brand became a global reference in sustainable family farming, studied by rural development organizations worldwide. The property's educational model influenced the creation of innovative rural schools that integrated theory and sustainable agricultural practice. Shadow became a character in children's books that taught values such as loyalty, courage, and environmental protection. The coin room received an additional collection of historical objects donated by other families in the region, becoming a community museum. The soil restoration techniques for degraded land developed on the property were applied in large-scale environmental recovery projects. The cooperative created a local social currency that facilitated exchanges between producers and strengthened the regional community economy. The transparency values demonstrated by Clayton inspired the creation of a cooperative governance observatory that monitored democratic practices. The Harper family story was included in the state's intangible heritage, recognizing its importance to the regional cultural identity. The example of sustainable management practiced on the property influenced the corporate policies of large corporations interested in social responsibility. Kevin developed a rural coaching methodology that combined personal development with modern agricultural techniques. Dr. Stephen created a network of lawyers specialized in rural property law, offering accessible legal support for small producers. Mr. Harold established microcredit criteria based on community impact, prioritizing projects that benefited collectives. The property became a climate resilience research center, developing adaptation strategies for agriculture in climate change scenarios. The food processing innovations developed by the cooperative added value to rural products and created local employment opportunities. The cooperative established an international exchange program that took American sustainable agriculture techniques to other tropical countries. Mrs. Margaret published a memoir that became an important historical document about rural life in the 20th century. The transformation inspired by the discovery of the coins demonstrated how family heritage can become a lever for sustainable community development. The values of honesty, perseverance, and social responsibility, exemplified by Clayton, continued to inspire new generations long after the original discovery. The property solidified itself as a symbol that true prosperity arises when individual success is shared with the community, honoring the past while building a better future. Shadow, now a venerable guardian of history, continued to protect not only the physical property, but also the values and traditions that made that place an example of transformation through character. The preserved coin room kept alive the memory of the moment that changed everything, reminding visitors that the most valuable treasures are those that create opportunities for others, not just for those who find them. The journey of Clayton Harper, which began with despair and nearly losing everything, had transformed into a legacy of hope and proof that ethical decisions, even in difficult times, can bear fruit that transcends generations. The oak tree where the coins were temporarily buried continued to grow, its deep roots symbolizing how right choices create solid foundations for lasting prosperity that benefits entire communities. And so, the story of the poor man, who almost demolished his house and found a treasure, became much more than an account of an archaeological discovery. It transformed into a modern parable about values, character, and the transformative power of decisions guided by honesty and love for one's neighbor. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this story and where you are watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you believe Clayton made the right decisions? I would love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, more importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other exciting stories like this one.